Okay, so that's our first dot point done. Now let's look at the second one. Here we are looking at identifying priority health issues. So we will be looking at the social justice principles. We will be looking at priority population groups, the prevalence of the condition, potential for prevention and early intervention, and costs to the individual and community. We'll also be arguing the case for why the decisions are made about health priorities by considering questions such as, who do we identify? How do we identify priority issues for Australia's health? What is the role of the social justice principles, and why is it important to prioritize? So you would have come across social justice principles in year 11. So let's go through them. We've got firstly equity, right? So resources allocated fairly for equal opportunity. And I always like to sort of think about this image to draw out the distinction between equality and equity. Equality is when everyone's getting the same thing, but equity is when people who need the resources, or individuals who need the resources, are getting those resources. They're getting the resources according to what they need. So the shortest person needed the 2 boxes to see, while the second shortest person only needed 1, and the tall person didn't need any at all, right? So this highlights that some groups face more disadvantages than others, and in the case of inequity, more resources are allocated to those who need it more resources allocated to those who need it to create equity. For example, those of lower socioeconomic economic status, for instance, those with less money, lower education, and lower employment, they have less access to healthcare. So to counter that, we've got things like Medicare, bulk billing, and PBS in place. Okay, now let's have a look at diversity. So that is the acknowledgement that populations are made up of, like the population is made up of different groups, cultures, and languages that results in different health needs. Like there's the diversity of health needs. So, for instance, we've got Asian populations, and we also have immigrants with ESL needs, right? So, an example here that caters to all is firstly that Medicare is available to all citizens, regardless of the language they speak, right, or their age. Secondly, immunization pamphlets are available in different languages in order to reach out to more people. Okay, supportive environments. So that's about ensuring that all Australians are supported in their rights to access services and be healthy. So, for example, environments need to support our health. So we need to have environments that promote healthy behavior. So, think about, we will obviously talk a lot more about this, and it keeps popping up throughout the syllabus, but think of like smoking-free zones. You're not allowed to smoke inside office buildings, inside restaurants, inside theatres. So it is promoting a healthy environment where you're restricted to smoking, to in only certain places. Now, remember, social justice principles, they're the influences and the goals of identifying health priorities. So we need to be able to identify health priorities based on these 3 principles. If social justice is not attained within a health issue, if you look at tobacco smoking, if you look at smoking in general, and we look at supportive environments, diversity, and equity, right, or we look at other issues, we need to think of attaining social justice, making sure that the social justice principles are addressed within the health issue, and we want to prioritize that. Now, priority population groups. So some population groups suffer greater health inequities than others, and we've already sort of touched upon it. Now we'll talk about it. And by focusing resources and prioritizing the groups that are suffering inequities, we improve those groups' health, right? And that obviously contributes to improving Australia's health in general. Now, let's look at prevalence. Firstly, prevalence again refers to how common the health issue is. And the more common it is, the more we are going to focus on it and we'll want to prioritize it. The greater the prevalence, the more burden then it's going to have on the more burden of disease it's going to have on the Australian healthcare system. So remember, burden of disease is the thing that occurs as a result of disease. So if you've got the disease, and then the burden of disease includes, obviously there's increased demand for health services. There are less resources available. There's obviously an emotional burden, and we'll talk a lot more about this when we look at the costs to individuals and communities. Now, looking at the potential for prevention and early intervention, right? So it's so much more efficient and cost effective to prevent and intervene with illnesses rather than to cure and treat those diseases. Now, remember, prevention is the act of stopping the disease from occurring altogether. So we've got immunizations programs to prevent hepatitis B. We've got campaigns for sun safety. Think of slip slop slap. Think about no hat, no play. All of these measures that are enforced from an early age to advocate for sun safety and prevent melanoma. Then also good diet and exercise to prevent obesity. Now, intervention is the act of interrupting a disease or stopping it from worsening. So, regular mammograms to detect breast cancer early and intervene with, before the disease processes. Then also we've also got skin checks for melanoma. Now, costs, indirect and direct costs. So remember, when we look at this, we're obviously thinking about the direct cost that comes to the individual and the community, like the financial cost to diagnose, to treat, and to care. But along with that, we also have indirect costs, that include that are related to the person, like the loss of income, them being absent from their job and having to find, and then the job's having to find a replacement, and the person perhaps losing their job in the process. And obviously, there are emotional consequences too. So, community, if you look at the direct cost to community, there's the treatment and caring cost. Treatment and caring, which costs billions of dollars. The indirect is that you'll have to find replacements in the work community, in workplaces. Then individual direct, obviously financial is the biggest one that comes to mind. There's financial cost. There's obviously, time cost in terms of like the time for appointment, time of work, and travel costs. And indirect costs, of course, are linked to the emotional trauma and the emotional trauma of both the people affected, their families, but also the mental health of the carers.